Kissing on 2, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, it is 1. Left land, slim west, copy.
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies podcast. I'm PR Ganapati, your host.
Just 70, Roger, report time southeast, Greenwich, D224, come midway, and yield still active.
So I hope you enjoyed those first two episodes with Air Chief Marshal Tyagi. As I mentioned in the introduction, he was among the first batch of 12 pilots selected to train in the UK and convert onto the Jaguar. And he went on to command Jaguar Squadron, 14 Squadron. So in the next two episodes, which will each be about an hour each, we're going to get in depth into his experience training with the RAF and converting onto the Jaguar. Stay tuned because you're going to find this really fascinating because what they went through was very different from what pilots had gone through before.
I was informed that I had been selected for Jaguar training.
Approximately which year was this?
This will be 1979. Oh,
79, right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the Jaguar project team was already there and then you all would go and get trained on the aircraft?
No. Well, the Jaguar project team wasn't yet there. I think, or they might have been there. I mean, I'm sorry, but my memory fails me. The Jaguar project team perhaps was already there. I was just, in fact, we were two different things. They were not co-located. Jaguar project team was with the factory, with the company, whilst we were undergoing training on the Jaguar aircraft with the Royal Air Force. So our contract was different in the sense that they were to monitor, Jaguar production, etc., and that all the contract requirements were met. It was technical job, but the flying job, we were flying with the Royal Air Force and not with British Aerospace, who were the manufacturers of the Jaguar aircraft. So very quickly, just before leaving, I needed to check what was this all about. Whilst I was a squadron leader, and you don't learn too much at that rank in air headquarters, then we just quickly ran through the history of the DPSA. Why, we used to joke in the Jaguars. We were making, the whole Air Force used to make fun of the underpoweredness of the Jaguar aircraft. And we used to say, it's still better than the MiG-21 because you took off from Palam and by the time you reached India Gate, somebody was calling bingo, I'm short of fuel. The history of, we needed something which would strike targets in the deep with a fair amount of load, but more importantly, not only the range of the strike aircraft, but really we were also looking for weapon aiming system, weapon delivery accuracy, and therefore avionics. By then technology had moved forward, and MiG-21 was, although it's still flying, was comparatively speaking not technologically quite there. So I think the Indian Air Force was looking for not only a strike aircraft with a range, with reasonable amount of weapon load carrying capability, but also modern day avionics and the weapon delivery accuracy. Also, the environment was changing. the old dive attacks were going out of fashion because of the presence of SAMs. Uh, Lay down attack, that means low level straight and level delivery at low level was coming into fashion, and therefore we needed an aeroplane with which was capable of all these things. Now, you may recall, Gani, I think your dad was involved in this evaluation along with Philip Rajkumar. They had evaluated the MiG-23 BN. With the Russians, were a little worried that we were looking at the Western markets. We were very friendly with the Russians or the Soviets in those days, and they were not happy that we were looking at the Western machines, and they had offered us the MiG-23 BN, which your dad and all had not had said that it's a maybe a good aircraft, but not good enough to meet our DPSA
Right.
requirement, deep penetration strike
Yeah.
aircraft requirement. Uh, I, the search therefore had narrowed down to basically, I would say, Sweden, UK, and France. UK with the Jaguar, France with the F1 Mirages. But USA was not an option, as you know, in those days of the Cold War. We were part of the Soviet camp and not part of the US camp. And one of the problems, incidentally, of the Swedish aircraft was that I think it had an American engine or American designed engine. And therefore, we were not keen on buying that. Yeah. So now, as you just to let you know before I go further, that Jaguar is an Anglo-French product. Okay, it's not an Anglo product, English product. It is not a French product. In fact, the history of the Jaguar is that it was designed as an advanced jet trainer. Now, the Royal Air Force discovered that it had long range, etc. It could fly low level, etc. Long for a long duration. So the French Air Force also flew the Jaguar, and the French Jaguar aircraft, I sat in it in one of the ferries, didn't look anything like the Jaguar that the Royal Air Force was flying. And the reason was that the British had gone and converted the Jaguar into a strike aeroplane with avionics. That means it has a head-up display, it had a moving map display, or the PMD as it was known, the projected map display. It had the kind of weapon aiming and auto release and calculations, etc. Basically, it was a step ahead in avionics. The French F1 Mirage, I think, as an aeroplane, was a better aeroplane than the Jaguar was, but unfortunately did not have the avionics, and therefore was sort of lost out to the Jaguar. So while it might have had a better engine and a better performance, but did not have, it had the gyro gun sight type of equipment on board, and therefore was not meeting our requirements. But one of the things is that you put a head-up display, PMD, weapon aiming systems, etc., auto release. Well, it costs money. You may recall this. I don't know whether you remember this, Kans. In the olden days, we used to write uh, the price of the aeroplane was written on the aeroplane. Somebody had said, we should be made aware of how expensive the equipment we operate. Yes, yes, yes. So it was the price of the aircraft was printed outside, was painted outside. And I recall that the MiG-21 we used to fly before we flew the Jaguar used to cost 76 or 78 lakhs, something in that region. Well, this bloody Jaguar was 8 to 10 times more expensive. Okay. So, so it was several times more expensive. So I am just saying that we were taking a leap forward not only in terms of money, but also in terms of technology, because none of the aircraft that we had operated had a display or a moving map display or a weapon capability to deliver automatically at low levels and in a dive and over the shoulder release, etc., and calculate. Well, it was fantastic move forward in terms of technology. So I'm saying very very happy. it had a long range, but as I said, it was designed as a uh, Anglo-French product, which was basically like a trainer aircraft, not supposed to do all this. Uh, I have to admit that the engine, since we were used to the afterburners of MiG-21, that it was an underpowered aircraft.
Well, I'm sure fuel efficiency comes with lack of power. So, you've got to, that trade-off is a natural trade-off, isn't it?
Yeah, so there was a trade-off, so it got a long range. It was a very efficient engine. At less power, you could travel a long distance. But the fact is that given the load and also given our conditions, now remember in Europe, in UK, where they operate the Jaguar, or shall we say European climate, and because they were flying in them in Germany as well. Um the climate is cold. You don't get the summer heat of North India that you get here, and therefore maybe the engine power perhaps was not such a big issue. But in India, it did become an issue. But it met all our requirements of range and avionics and weapon delivery. May I also say that one of the things that happened at that time was that the Jaguar was designed for air-to-air refueling. But at that time, India had no air-to-air refuelers, and we are talking back in the 70s, right? Uh, so we thought we will save some money and say, yeah, remove this damn air-to-air refueling doofer, because we don't need it. And the British Aerospace, from what I remember, as it was so long back, said that it will cost you money to remove it. So we said, okay, in which case, leave it. And it became very useful many years later. Uh, you got the air-to-air refueling capability for something that you had already paid for in some sense. May I also say that the Royal Air Force used to also have capability to deliver nuclear weapons from Jaguar. It might have been a factor in our selecting this aircraft. I don't know whether it was or not. I have no idea. But because in the 70s we were far away from being a declared nuclear weapon state, but in 74 we had a nuclear explosion. So I don't know whether this was a thought or not. But while I was sort of writing something down, I did remember that the Royal Air Force aircraft were capable of nuclear weapon delivery.
And of course, talking about avionics, we ordered it with the Navas, but knowing that we would upgrade to the Darren standard soon. And so, the platform became even more potent. Yeah.
Yes, but well, we had some idea. Remember, guns. It takes years before a contract like this is signed. Years. Uh, so this thoughts keep changing, new thoughts keep coming. Yes, by the time we had got the aircraft, we were already on to upgrading this. We had asked the Brits, will it be possible to upgrade? The cost would have shot up immensely. So we said we will go ahead with the Marconi nav attack system, and we will upgrade it later. So it was a bit of a risk at that time, because nobody really knew what our capability to upgrade was. It's a great success story, what we did. Great success story. So very proud of that. But at that time, we were not certain, but we said, let's buy it now and we will examine it later. Uh, I have to say that the Indian Air Force and selected 12 pilots to go and fly the Jaguar and train on Jaguar aircraft, with Wing Commander Nadkarni leading and 11 of us. We quickly named them Dirty Dozen. Now, what I want to emphasize this is not the first aircraft we bought, but all the aircraft that we bought in the last few years were of Soviet origin. The MiG-21, type of aeroplanes and the different versions of MiG-21 uh, and the Sukhoi 7s, and you know, whenever we, or even the transport aircraft that we bought, the IL-76 and the AN-12 and the AN-32, we did only the very basic training in Soviet Union. That means we learned to how to take off, land. Shall we say the conversion on the aircraft took place? Not the exploitation, weapons exploitation, not the exploitation of the aeroplane as a weapons platform. So, in a sense, this was a break that we were to go and fly with the Royal Air Force, who had been, you know, there was a contract between the British Aerospace and the Royal Air Force to train us. But the training was when we left the Royal Air Force, finished our training, we were fully operational on Jaguar.
Fascinating. Okay.
So there was a difference in the approach. With the Soviets, we only converted on the aircraft, brought the aircraft here, and the rest of the training we conducted ourselves. In this case, a exception was made. The first lot, subsequently, let me tell you, this happened with the Mirage contract, Mirage 2000 contract, the Rafale contract, etc. But this was the first time India tried this. And this lot landed up. Why it is important is what it did to the Indian Air Force. So I won't go into the names of the dirty dozen. I think your listeners
I have a
would.
photograph. I'll share a photograph with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So who are they is not important. Well, perhaps what is important is that we were divided into batches of 4. So the first 4 were led by Wing Commander Nadkarni. There was Michael McMahon, Joginder Singh Sisodia, who were both squadron leaders. And then there was this Flight Lieutenant Sattu Adhikari. He was the youngest in this whole group, in the first 4 that went. I was part of the second group where I was the senior most, but the others were DDS Kumar, Charlie Brown, who later commanded the Air Force, and young Tiny Kumaria, who retired as the vice chief. 4 of us headed there, and it is important to say that we hadn't a clue what Britain was all about. But although, I mean, most of us had done some courses abroad. Like I said, I had spent 6 months in the United States. When we were leaving, we were only told that we were, because we were flight lieutenants or squad leaders, we could only travel economy class. And everybody said economy class, pata nahi whether they will serve us enough alcohol or not. So DDS Kumar's sister-in-law, his wife's sister, used to fly for Air India. She said, "You tell me what flight you are on. I will make sure I'm on that flight." Well, she was not, but her friends were. Well, I can only say that when the 4 of us left India, we were not fully fit when we landed in London, because the Air India's hospitality was immense throughout. We landed in London. It was Easter then, and we spent because of Easter holidays, we got a few days in London. I think DDS Kumar was only interested in finding out how many pubs London has, whilst Tiny Kumaria was only keen on seeing all the tourist places in London. But 3-4 days of happy days in London, and then we were packed off for a sea survival course. Now, at Portsmouth in southern England, they conduct this course. there is a lot of theoretical training. If the temperature of the sea, and this was beyond us, remember we had gone from a warm climate, is below 10 degrees centigrade, then you have to wear what they call the goon suit, the immersion suit. That they used to say that if you the temperatures are less than 10 degrees, water temperature is less than 10 degrees, in 10 minutes flat, if you are not properly clothed, in 10 minutes flat, your will to survive will go. So there was a fairly professional course of sea survival conducted, how to survive in the cold waters of the sea. And at the end of the course, this was a 3-day course, I think. At the end of the course, we were taken into the English Channel, uh, thrown in a dinghy with our flying suits on, with the goon suits on, and with our helmet and whatever. From our boat, we are pushed into the sea. Then you get into the dinghy, you inflate the dinghy, and then you're left out in the sea on your own. And they make sure that you are not within visual distance of each other. You can't see each other. And then finally, they will come and rescue you. Uh, there was no helicopter because of weather, but so they rescued us by boats. But I have to say, all of us shared our experiences after the sea survival, the actual sea survival, and all of us felt lonely, wondering when will these so and so's come and pick us up, and when will this misery end. But it was a unique experience for those who had gone from the warm waters of the Indian subcontinent to the very cold waters of the British Isles. Very interesting.
Now, is that suit very uncomfortable? Is it very bulky?
Yeah, it is the most not, especially guys like us who had grown up and flying with a normal flying overall, and yes, it was not the most pleasant thing. It's not just the suit. You have to cover your entire. The immersion suit has to be waterproof, but you also have to wear the kind of gloves that you wear, the kind of headgear that you wear, there where the water cannot enter your body. Well, it will finally, your face will get wet, but the rest of your body will remain uh, free of water.
Got it.
So it is not the most pleasant. We were very happy later on when flying in Lossiemouth. We had to fly with the immersion suit there, but once the summers came, uh, and they all said Easter, the spring is in the air. Actually, we were feeling cold like hell, and we used to wonder what spring this is. But subsequently, when the temperature of the sea goes up about 10 degrees, then you don't have to fly with the immersion suit. And then we flew in the normal overall and a G suit. But no, not an extremely pleasant experience flying with the immersion suit. But thank God we don't have to wear them in India.
Right.
Visual to before noon of visualizing. Just need 7B, like your report that southeast, connect for somebody's way, and you'll select it.
So, where was the flying training and what was that syllabus like? And how different was it from our own conversion and operational syllabus?
Yeah, I will just come to that. Firstly, a few things. One is we rented a car and drove to Lossiemouth and visited some friends and relatives en route. And Lossiemouth is north of, well, north of Great Britain, but north of Scotland. In Scotland, north of Edinburgh, because that's a town most guys can spot on the map. It's a old Lossiemouth is an old RAF base. The Jaguar OCU, Operation Conversion Unit, was in Lossiemouth. Oh, sorry, yeah, that's correct. The Royal Air Force Jaguar Conversion. Uh, so they ran their ground school, which we call the MCF in our Air Force. Uh, their simulator was there, Jaguar simulator, and the entire training, flying training, to declare you fully operational is done in the Jaguar OCU, which was placed in at that time in Losima. Well, they had two flights, both commanded by squadron leaders. One flight used to undertake conversion task, which is the flight we flew with, and the other flight used to conduct the weapon aiming instructor's course, which is akin to our PI course. Uh, and that's two of our stalwarts I know, late Sunil Lad and Tiny Kumaria, uh, underwent those courses at subsequently. Uh, so we landed up in Lossiemouth, and the compass variation was 12.5 degrees.
Right.
Uh, and it's well up north, and we used to joke that if you throw a stone from here in the northerly direction, it will fall on the North Pole. Uh, it's quite, and therefore it was quite cold uh, for the Indians. And there was this, we landed up in Lossiemouth. For us, the major attraction was that the four pilots of the first batch, Kearney, Michael McMahon, Sisodia, and Adhikari, were already there. And therefore, in some senses, uh, our apprehension of where we landed up went away, because those guys were there to brief us on how we should go about conversion. It was nice. It was friendly, and there they ran the ground school, uh, which is which is in the Air Force parlance the MCF. It was a 2 week of ground training, basically lectures. And here I need to, on the systems of the Jaguar, emergencies, all the pilot's notes, that was covered in 2 weeks. And here I have to say the difference in approach of the RAF and the Indian Air Force. No, the Indian Air Force wants, for example, it came naturally to us. There is no oil pressure gauge in the Jaguar aircraft. There's an oil pressure failure light, red light. So they said when the oil pressure failure light comes on, you switch off that engine. You pull the HP cock back, whatever they were teaching us. But we were keen to know, sir, what is the pressure on which the oil pressure light will come on? They said, well, why do you want to know? There is no gauge. We wanted little details, and they said, no, just stick to the basics. Don't, why should you know? Just so their checks were hydraulics in the green sector. Now, don't worry about what pressure it is. As long as the gauge is showing in the green sector, you are doing fine. If it is outside the green sector, then you have to worry about. So we found change in approach in the ground school itself. The second thing I want to tell you about ground school is that the Indians always topped the ground school. Well, we used to work several times harder than them. We were not taking weekends off on fishing trips. We weren't climbing mountains. We were focusing on the ground school. And also, there was this desire that we should do better than the others.
I'm also guessing you were all far more experienced than the RAF pilots over there.
We were also, well, shall we say, they were average guys getting posted to convert onto Jaguars. We were a
Yeah.
selected lot. The Air Force had done a selection process to send us there. So perhaps this comparison is not very good, but I have to say that we all worked hard to ensure that we not only topped, that we did very well in the ground school. One little story at the end of the ground school, 2 weeks, there was a test conducted, like a final test. And that's where you realize that you have topped the course or whatever. at the, when we got our program, firstly, I also have to say, let me just say this. In the classroom, the summers had arrived according to the Brits. We had gone from the plains of Punjab, and we were still in winter uniform. Those guys would put the ACs
Right.
on, the RAF guys, and they were very friendly. We got along famously with them. Uh, they would put and we said, put the damn AC off. Uh, there was this forever this race. They would put the AC on, and some Indian will go and put that damn thing off. Because they were used to this weather. We were not. On the final day of the ground school, when the test was conducted, the program sheet said, mm, visit, educational visit. So what is educational visit? From 8:30 to 10:30, the test was conducted. We gave in our papers, and then we all were all put in a bus and taken. Guess what? We were in Scotland, so we were taken to a brewery, and we were shown how the Scotch whiskey is produced. Um, it's except that the PRO of the brewery we were taken to was an Englishman, was not a Scot. And the first thing he said is, the Scots have sold you this story that they produce the best whiskey in the world. Well, let me tell you, they don't. The Japanese produce the
Oh,
best whiskey in the
interesting.
world. Uh, yeah, according to him, says this is all hard sell. So I bet he must have lost his job after we visited him. But it was an interesting tour, because we were obviously offered pure malt, single malts, straight from the barrel. Very interesting too. Let me now tell you that after the ground school and simulator, we started flying. Firstly, the simulator instructors. Now, that's the other thing. They were not Jaguar pilots. So Hans, one guy was a Canberra pilot who had never flown a Jaguar, but he could instruct on. Their criteria for simulator, they said we can't afford to qualify Jaguar pilot to conduct simulator training. Simulator में क्या है, कोई भी उड़ा लेगा, तुम्हें उड़ाना है, you have to fly it. So their approach was very different from, let's say, we have. But when we started flying, we realized few things. One is, we had to get used to the avionics. We had not flown anything with avionics in our lives, although we had done simulator training on it. But you tended to get focused on the head of display, for example. Your look around sort of suffered. And it took us a little while before we got totally comfortable with the kind of avionics on
Now, a
board.
simulator itself of that high fidelity and full action, you the first time you had ever seen that, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. So simulator, big help. But I'll tell you, notwithstanding the simulator training, all of us were struggling not to get logged on to the head of display. You could get away in the simulator, right? Because there is no the simulators were not as advanced as they are today. Remember, we are talking more than 4 decades back. Um, I have to tell you that we had gone from a fair weather Air Force. Uh, you know, we didn't, well, it doesn't quite, you don't get the kind of clouds, cumulus clouds, cumulonimbus clouds like we do in India. So the clouds are also more forgiving. But I have to mention that we were used to flying in clear sky weathers or near clear sky. If they wait for clear skies, they will never get airborne.
Right.
Where in Scotland will you get clear skies? So it was forever cloudy, low clouds, raining. In fact, I remember doing my dual check with my instructor and walking to the aircraft, and it was drizzling. And I was wondering, where is this guy going? Look at the weather. But they are so used to this weather that they think nothing of it. That's one major difference that, and therefore we had to get over our inhibitions of saying, hey, this weather is fine, it's flyable, it's just okay. There's nothing to worry about. Uh, we had to get used to the avionics and also the approach. For example, we said, what is your local flying area? We said, what do you mean by local flying area? I said, what is your circuit joining, circuit leaving procedure? Because that's what we were used to in India, still are used to. And they would say, no, no, I have not understood. What is it? Circuit leaving circuit? You leave circuit or you join circuit. So their approach was, if you are IMC, very much like civilian approach, then you are totally under control. Somebody will tell you what to do, what height to fly, where, what direction to maintain, whatever. If you are VMC, then you decide for yourself what you want to do. So therefore, they used to run in from wherever they wanted and join circuit. It was like, if once you have declared your VMC, the ATC also washes their hands off and say,
See and
okay,
avoid at
it's your
that point.
business. So
Yeah.
they are running in, let's say, from opposite directions to the same circuit or to the same runway, and the ATC will be advising red formation is approaching reciprocal at this height. If you are the same height, they would talk to each other and say, hey, get up by 500 feet or something. Uh, so I said, isn't this dangerous? And they would say, why? We are not colliding in the air. Years have passed, decades have passed, and we are doing fine. But it is something that mentally we were not used to. And therefore, it took us a little while to adjust to the new environment. The environment, from weather, from the type of aircraft, avionics, we were used to flying the MiG-21. That there is no local flying area. You just go and fly VMC anywhere, etc., etc. And then they would say, today we will go and do fight in the mountains. Mountains means in Scotland, we won't call them hills in India. For us, mountain is Mount Everest, Kanchenjunga, or some Nanga
Right, right.
Parvat. Not some very little hillock which is 300 feet high or 500 feet high. But they would say, let's do mountain climb today. Uh, and we used to make fun of them and said, hey, you want a clue what a mountain is? Uh, but their emphasis was on map making, for example. Now remember, we used to use a million map on the MiG-21 from which the force we had gone. They used to say, if a target is on a million map, then it's not worth striking. You will not be able to hit it. I mean, you can't destroy it in a Jaguar aircraft unless you are doing a nuclear bomb. With conventional weapons, it means nothing. So they introduce us to 1:50,000 map. Not introduced anemic for gunnery meets and all. We had used it, but not on regular basis. That they would navigate on a 500,000 map and not on a million map. And from IP to target, the initial point to the target, they would use the 1:50,000 map. And in one strike, low level strike, they would engage up to 10 targets, not 10, sorry, my apologies, 6 targets. So you had 1/2 mil map in the cockpit and you had 6 IP to target maps in the cockpit. So one of the things we learned was how to manage maps in the cockpit. The map, you have already stuck a target, that map must go somewhere else. And it can't fly all over the cockpit. So really, we also learned cockpit management. We also learned that whilst in the air defense systems, we were fairly aggressive and competent, both aggressive and competent. Remember, we were all FCLs and such like things. On low level work, we found them extremely aggressive. The way they would turn corners, the way they would fly in the hilly terrain was far more aggressive. And therefore, what we learned there was, how do I put it? They would ask a question: how can you fly on a million map in a MiG 21? But I'll tell you what will you strike? So we said, "Meh, an airfield." He said, no, what at an airfield? What is the target on the airfield? And we would say, well, let's say the ATC, the air traffic control building. He said, no, 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 that is not good enough. What an air traffic control building? So we would think, because we had never thought like that. We said, okay, where the ATC controller sits, his cabin. He said, no, 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 that's not good enough. What window will your bomb
My
enter from?
God.
So you say, okay, from the easterly direction. He said, no, 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 not good enough. Which chair is he sitting on? The ATC controller. He said, that the bomb in the bucket philosophy. Okay. So frankly, they changed our attitudes. So the biggest thing that happened to our Jaguar conversion was we learned to be aggressive on the low level. We learned to say not one target, we can take up to six targets or more. We learned to make the maps far more ready. Initially, it used to take us 7, 8 hours to plan a strike, then 4, 5 hours. Oh my God, we had to assist each other in planning strikes. And then the expertise, of course, grew. So we not only the weather, the new aircraft, the new system, also learning the damn accents. No two British talk the same English. One guy talks in Scottish accent, one in Irish accent, one in Welsh accent. So for us, and then we were just kept. We it was a great learning curve, and I am saying the greatest thing that happened was when we got back, we introduced the whole Air Force to a half mil map and to the 1:50 target.
Wow.
The entire culture changed thanks to our being trained with the Royal Air Force. But they were champions, as I said. They were more aggressive than us in low level work, in weapon delivery. They would go and strike a bridge, let's say, somewhere. Now, from another base, another strike squadron is also striking the same bridge. But they said, we are BMC, we'll see each other, we'll pull away. Well, one of the things is the visibility is pretty decent in that area. There's no muck. There are no. I live in the NCR, yeah, which is the 30th portion of the universe. I'm just saying the weather was far clearer there. You could see great distances, and they would say, "Hey, no, no, I'm also coming in. You come in 5 minutes later." You could go and strike the range anytime after getting airborne weapon delivery. They used to fly with practice weapons all the time, and say if the range is free, can I come in next 10 minutes? And he said, yes, you can. There was no booking of the range slot. You could ask for it in the air. Uh, there are many things which were so different from what we were used to. And finally, they said, now we will move on to the air combat thing. We were all MiG 21 jocks. We were far superior in that. Oh, there we showed our superiority. Our training was brilliant. Their Jaguar pilots just say, my safety lies in flying at 100 feet. I will fly in the bushes and get away. He doesn't train too much for the air combat. Since we had gone from the Vic fleet, we were all very well trained. On that front, we outscored them by miles. Uh, while we were little kids in the low level work, in the once it came, we were in our elements by then.
Visual to before you're on a bridge away. Just need 7B, like you're report that southeast, you can edge before somebody's way, and you'll select it.
Now, before you went there, a low-level strike in the Indian Air Force, what sort of altitudes were you used to, and what were you taught to do in?
Well, we used to do it at 100 meters was the lowest we got. That's about 300 odd feet. Their IP to target runs were all done at 200 feet. Okay, and for red flag, they used to train at flying at 100 feet. Now we had learned this, so when we did the exercises with the Navy over the sea, there are no obstructions, so you can fly low. We used to fly at 100 feet then. But I'm saying this exposure helped. I'm just saying on air combat, group combat. So one of the things they used to ask is, "See, you guys all from the same squadron?" We said, "No, we are not. We are from different units, but we could coordinate 4 aircraft like nobody else could. We were really champions in that. We meaning all 12 of us. So on that front, I have to say the Indian Air Force was way ahead of, of at least the Jaguar fleet. We don't know about their air defense fleet, but they, like I said, their focus was on escape at low levels. Well, I, not the very first two aircraft were ferried. The only guy who was allowed to ferry was Nadkarni, and that was in the two-seater. Frankly, the British aerospace test pilot ferried it for all practical purposes. Nadkarni was a, but he got an experience of how to ferry. Subsequently, we all ferried our own jets. Several ferries were done. Three, four ferries each one of us did. Well, the first aircraft that we got, the first two aircraft squadrons worth of aircraft that we got, first 40 aircraft, I think, uh, they were all Royal Air Force aircraft given to us on loan, and till such time our own aircraft were delivered to us because we wanted to build up two squadrons quickly. So that was the contract with them. I have to also add that DDS Kumar and I, after we finished conversion in Lossiemouth, there was an RAF base at Coltishall, uh, where which is shut down now. The two of us went and flew with the RAF squadron, learning how to do FR, fighter reconnaissance, uh, on the Jaguar aircraft because we had bought a IR pod for the Jaguar. And DDS and I were trained to fly that. So we stayed back an extra month there to fly with their squadron, who taught us how how to do. I have to again say their approach was in our Jaguar squadron. FR was an additional task to the strike task. In their Air Force, FR, the whole squadron did only FR. They were called the Recce Pukes. They did only reconnaissance. So whatever the things, so each one of them, we couldn't afford it at that time, but each one of them used to have a slide projector at home, and those were the days of slides. They would have the slides of tanks and aircraft and ships, and they could recognize any tank. Not only, and they were deeply into it. They said, "This is a tank." I said, "No, no, which tank?" They would name the make of the tank. I said, "No, no, no, no. But tell me more about it." He says, This is the one with the Belgian engine and modified to that." So their actually whole approach was, if your camera fails, your eye should be able to capture and come back and report what you saw. So they were very professional, yeah, very professional. I have to say it was very impressive, to see this. They exceeded my expectations, and they were very good teachers. They hid nothing. One of the things is they were far more open than in the Western world, I suppose. Then let's say they were not looking back or looking over the shoulder to find out, am I supposed to talk about it or not. They were extremely open and friendly. Uh, Yes, so a lot was learned. I would suggest that uh, when the Jaguars came to India, one of the things is they changed the operating philosophy of the strike force. because the others adopted it. The kind of map making, the kind of strike work, the kind of low level work, the kind of aggressiveness, the kind of weapon delivery, everything, our attitudes changed. I think the greatest service the Jaguar did was change the thinking of the Indian Air Force. To me, that uh, Jaguar has its limitations. It's a good aeroplane, but it's also 40-year-old. But I would suggest that when we bought that aircraft, we bought new attitude along with it. Very good, excellent. And I have to say the same thing is applied to our Mirage 2000 and Rafale pilots. They bought how to exploit this machine correctly. Or if you remember your father and others who were part of the MiG 21 fleet earlier, you see, the Russian taught us circuit and landing, and that too, their method of circuit landing. Oh, they will go over outer marker, inner marker, 4 kilometers, straight finals. More like a airline aircraft. Uh, it is the Indian Air Force that then developed their own systems. It took a long time, but where I would suggest the Jaguars, what the Jaguars did, and subsequently, this is true for the Mirage fleet as well as the Rafale fleet, they brought in new attitudes, but we changed the strike, the parameters forever. Not because we were smart. It is the kind of exposure that we have had. It is the training with the Royal Air Force was of immense help because we learned their attitudes
Things
towards it.
like laser designator, laser rangefinder, all those things which were completely new to our Air Force, isn't it? So smart bomb, so to speak.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. The entirely new concepts, but I'm also suggesting the aggressiveness, the mm, the the thought process. To me, the philosophy of operation was the biggest trade-off. Well, if we got a laser rangefinder, etc., we remember we paid for it, we had thought of it, how to exploit it. That is the equipment. But I am saying the whole approach of put that bomb in the bucket. Don't just strike a building. Uh, the whole approach therefore changed. I believe our strike force started thinking differently. Yeah, yeah. When we got back, well, they were so initially all systems suffered from this. There were 2 aircraft, 3 aircraft. They came in stages, and there was no flying clothing because we were issued flying clothing by the British Royal Air Force, and we had to leave it behind. So actually, when we got back here, we were sharing flying clothing, the same helmet one pilot will use, and then we would dry it up on front of a fan, and another pilot would would then get take off in it. It was quite horrendous, if you ask me. Uh, it took a long time for us to get the spares organized, which is in which box, which tool is in which box. It took a fair amount of time for the system to settle down. Then there were first 2 aircraft came. A month later, 3 more joined in. Then a month, 2 months later, another 3 joined in. So it was a slow build up of the fleet. Uh, and then we started converting pilots in India uh, because this 12 would not last forever. Uh, we started converting with Shri Barbara, who was later our vice chief of air staff, um, being the first pilot to be converted in India on the Jaguar aircraft. Uh, we also learned a few things like when we settled down and the spare situation was okay, that the testing rigs were installed, the work services was completed. Um we also learned to cheat a little. Sometimes our kit would Well, it's supposed to give you, in the best case, about 15 yards accuracy of bomb drop in a level flight, low level. But that was not good enough for a gunnery mate. So we learned how to use. I remember Air Marshal, later Air Marshal A.K. Singh, at that time, was he a flight lieutenant? Um, he would use his pitot head to drop the bomb. So we could fly at 200 feet with the help of the HUD very accurately, and then use the pitot head for weapon delivery, and he got a direct hit every time. So obviously you can't use this it's kind of technique in war, that you have to rely on the kit. But for gunnery meets, etc., we seem to have beaten the system and won several gunnery meets because we learned how to cheat the system. uh, yeah, and Ambala was a good base to start with. It's an old base. I think we were very happy. But Gani, you grown up in the service. Your younger days were all with the Air Force. You will recall that whenever you get a new machine, all the eyes are on you. Uh, every time a Jaguar, I think, got airborne, we used to joke that Western Air Command is informed, he's airborne, he's landed, he's safe, or whatever. Maybe it was not correct, or not true, but
No, but every
such was the
VIP that
story.
visited
Uh,
India was flown to Ambala to be shown the Jaguars making a
so I'm
low-level
just saying
strike.
that, the WAC was monitoring every little thing, and the what to say? All the VIPs, though, I mean, when everybody wanted to have a look at an aeroplane that costs 8 to 10 times more than the MiG-21. Uh, so in Ambala, we had officer in charge Kaju, officer in charge Kishmesh, officer in charge for our VIP visits. We had an SOP written down because they would all come to the squadron and see the aircraft. Many hilarious occasions when the suddenly the VIP's visit is postponed and we've finished off all the cashew nuts. The youngsters have attacked it, and suddenly the VIP decides to come again. By then, the cashew nuts are gone. Uh, uh, we had many such
So
experiences.
tell me about
Uh,
operationally, sir. You were mounting raids on Ambala itself, but also a lot of other bases who were mounting caps and,
Yes,
you
yes.
know, mm.
Craig, I have to say that what we learned in UK, we were exploiting the machine fairly accurately within the constraints that the IAF operates on. One thing that I want to say is that another experience of ours was that many of us were involved in ferrying aeroplanes from UK to India. So the Jaguars were produced in by British Aerospace at Wharton, where Air Marshal Jal's team was. Um, you know, but they had to be brought on our own. That was part of the contract, that we will ferry the aircraft. So we used to go to Wharton, and we used to do what were known as shakedown flights. One or two, just check flights and check air tests that all is well, and then fly. Into India via France, via Brindisi in Italy, southern Italy, via Cairo, via Baghdad, via Dubai, all sorts of places. And they used to change. Sometimes via Kuwait, sometimes via Laskar, and that also was a tremendous experience.
Individual to California individual. Just need 7D, like your report type southeast, connection, for come into it, and you'll select it.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends. Give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.